Welcome to Conversations with an Average Joe and how times have changed. My God, how did we lose control of our lives so quickly? And just a few years ago, our play in New York was exposing political and corporate corruption and greed and the incompetence of those we elected to office, warning that it was our complacency that will cause our downfall. And those who were supposed to be representing our interests were getting rich by following their leaders and their parties. And those in charge were directing our country where they wanted to go, which now appears like hell. And things have changed without us being united, objecting, and protesting, since we're all involved in the COVID mask vaccination fight. And then the next diversions from what was our normal would get a foothold on our distractions with again preventing us from rebelling or even just offering a judgment or opinion. We just didn't have the time to object. So now, today it's about the death and destruction in Ukraine with our decisions of our elected officials helping cause everything to happen as quickly and deadly as it has, seeming to me like it had to be planned, with a bunch of sheep following along. Now, I don't think I'm a conspiracy theorist. And nowadays, if you say the wrong thing, you get labeled as a nut. And that's okay with me. I'll take that chance. But everyone's it seems like, is so afraid of being offensive and letting people get away with making decisions that are screwing up our lives. And it needs to be exposed. So we need to spread a truth that's based on fact. So as an independent, no longer in office or planning on running for office, I'm going to take a chance and expose the fake news on all sides and the stupid opinions disguised as fact. Yeah. Being an average Joe who shared in our loss of liberties and livelihoods, I kept thinking it couldn't get any worse. But here we are today with the people controlling our lives not knowing what the hell they're doing. Or maybe they do know what they're doing. And what's happening in Ukraine? That's now threatening the future of our country. Didn't just happen out of the blue. Okay, think back at all that led up to it. And instead of asking how or when or who or where, just ask why. Was it something like incompetence or mistakes or even unforeseen circumstances that caused what some thought were pretty stupid decisions? And while we have disagreements about things that are happening, it's when there's a pattern of decisions continuing to have a negative impact on our country that we need to ask why. Why? And it is a pattern, trust me. Like the opening of our borders, encouraging millions of unknown illegal entries, requiring their unlimited funding while veterans are homeless. The closings of drilling for oil that took us from a surplus to a shortage, so now we're buying off of our enemies, increasing the price of gas so many of us can no longer pay our bills. Then the disaster and military embarrassment and lives cost from our failed Afghan extraction, and the unfathomable debt driven with the excuse of COVID and continuing to increase inflation to a point of bankrupting a middle class and possibly our nation. And that's what the world sees, what our enemies see, what Putin sees. And we all know his goals were always ambitious about reforming the Soviet Union. But he was just waiting for an opening, an opportunity, Anyway, some years ago, I taught a couple of graduate courses. One was human behavior that analyzed what motivated people to act like they do. I was fortunate to have some really outstanding students they were already professionals with a wealth of experience they shared. But every time I taught the courses, one thought also followed at the end, that we best understand others by walking in their shoes. So now we have Putin's shoes to walk in, to which I can add my observation of this KGB spy isolated without anyone to trust, riding bare-chested on a horse for the world to see his strength that most likely hides a coward and a bully with a fear of losing power if others are allowed to make that decision, exposing the paranoia and brutality of like a Hitler or Stalin. But the shoes he's now walking in have been waiting to be presented with a real outlook of having Ukraine join with NATO, which would then have a presence at the Russian border, where he also claims there's a joint US-Ukraine bioexperimentation lab close by, which he compares to China's Wuhan lab. So that's the excuses and the reasons walking his shoes bring. And then, to add to the mix, his perception of a weakened, split United States as a country with its disputes over COVID and vaccinations, and even showing its military commitment with a willingness to fire seasoned military patriots over its vaccination policy, along with our unruly crime and protests and riots in the streets. Can you imagine how bad that must look? And how much Putin must have thought, with all that confusion and COVID disputes all over the world, that now was just the right time for a strike on Ukraine. And that's what encouraged his brutal scorched earth attack to attempt to destroy all of Ukraine, killing defenseless women and children and elderly civilians who don't pose him any threat. But why? Why did Putin do it now? Well, it was again the invite by our president, loosely disguised as making a policy statement he didn't need to make, saying that we would accept a minor incursion of Russian troops into Ukraine, and that under no circumstances would our troops engage Russians on Ukrainian soil. Why would he say that? It's like a reverse red line, where we're telling Putin the line we won't cross. Stupidity, or not. It's as if he was opening the door for Putin to go into Ukraine much the same way those millions were invited to cross our borders. Again, spelling out there would be no response. And like our hasty Afghan retreat with the Taliban dictating our decisions, telling us what to do. That's the pattern I'm talking about. And add to that the members of Congress and media giants like Tucker Carlson from the right and seemingly taking Russia's side, giving Biden some cover. And if you still believe it's all a coincidence, then I have a slightly used, leaking, recently bombed nuclear power plant in Chernobyl for sale. So that brings us back to the issue at hand with Putin in total control, using a vicious, one-sided war with all the cards in his possession, as our president continues to surrender to the fear of a conflict with Russia, as Putin doesn't have any fear of us. And now Putin must continue, because he can't erase the brutality he's already inflicted on Ukrainians. And if he quits, the view will be that he lost, and that the damage then does what that does to his future. So as despicable as it may seem, with the continuing slaughter of the innocent, but also considering the position of our president in not allowing for stopping the bloodshed and not allowing for no fly zone or more planes, we must give Putin a way out of this war so he can save face. If not, the war will undoubtedly carry on to NATO, and we'll have to become involved. But now, with everything that's happened in Ukraine's past and all the agreements that were broken when Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, it's clear that Ukraine was not able to rely or depend upon NATO, including us. And maybe now it's time to seek to be an independent country without any alliances, which would benefit all concerned. And that will provide a buffer between Russia and NATO, which was also agreeable to Russia before the attack began. The United Nations also needs to send in a peacekeeping force to the border between Ukraine and Russia, and an investigate team to examine whether the claims made by Putin about the bio-experimentation lab are true. In the meantime, while Putin may or may not be bluffing about going nuclear if we escalate our assistance, the bluff has to be called, because he'll continue using his nuclear threat as he threatens NATO from bases he thinks he could soon have in Ukraine, or demanding to have sanctions removed, or creating a new Cuban Missile Crisis somewhere, maybe Cuba. And Biden ain't no JFK. But who's our Zelensky? Putin must know at this point that his hopes for a united Soviet Union has disappeared. And if he doesn't take the deal, then we know his assaults and threats will continue on until somebody bombs Moscow. And now it's time for us to walk in the shoes of our Ukrainians. Just saying. May God bless Ukraine, and may God bless all of us and protect us. Have a good night.